Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. We're going to get started the webinar in 1 minute. A few more people still logging in. I have 6:59, so we'll give them 1 more minute to log in and then we'll get started the webinar in approximately 1 minute. Okay folks, we'll get started tonight's webinar. I have 7 p.m. on my clock, so we'll get started. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight's webinar is delivered by myself, Bobby Lennox, the Manager of Player Development with the Ontario Soccer Association. And with me tonight from Hamilton, at home in Hamilton, is Carl Horton. Carl is the Regional Manager of Player Development with the OSA, and Carl looks after the West region of Ontario. So if you have any player development concerns or player development ideas, Carl's the guy to contact if you're in the West area of the province. Carl will be responding to questions tonight, so if you have a question during the presentation, please type in your question in the question panel, and Carl will do his very best to respond. Obviously, if we get an awful lot of questions, Carl won't be able to respond to them all, but we will leave the webinar open at the end to give Carl an opportunity to catch up on any questions he may have missed. And also, if there are any questions we're unable to get to due to high volume, we will put those on the website for people to review at a later date. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for people who were not able to join us tonight, and is a repeat broadcast of a webinar we done earlier this year. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll get started. So tonight's webinar, as you can see, scheduled from 7 to 7:45 p.m. This is the last webinar in our series, or our series to date. We've completed, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 webinars to date, and tonight's webinar will be the last of this current schedule. If you have any ideas for webinars or things you would like more information on, please drop us a line at the OSA, either Carl Horton, myself, Bobby Lennox, or Billy Wilson. Billy Wilson is the Regional Manager for Eastern Ontario, and we will respond to your ideas and suggestions for webinars. All the original webinars you see there are available on the OSA website, and you can view them at your leisure through the OSA's Grassroots Player Development area. There's some contact information from myself and Carl, including our Twitter accounts. So please feel free to drop us an email and let us know what you thought of the webinar, or if you have any other questions for the Player Development Department. Again, Billy Wilson has recently joined us. Billy has been in the job a couple of weeks now, so Billy's quickly getting his feet wet, getting out and meeting with clubs, and Billy is available for those folks in the east end of the province. So tonight's webinar is entitled Grassroots Soccer Development Inclusive Programs. And what we're going to do is give clubs some ideas, some best practices on inclusive programs and how we can include more children in our development programs and hopefully create more players for life and more players who enter into the elite stream. If we create more players for life, we'll create more coaches, more fans, more supporters, and more administrators of the game. So it's really important that we create a good environment for these kids, and we include them rather than exclude them in our programs. just quickly we'll go through some of the content. We'll take a look at how grassroots soccer was delivered in the past. It's important to acknowledge that a lot of excellent work was done in the past, but like all things in life, we move forward, things change, and we're constantly looking at different ways and improved ways of doing things. We're going to talk about open rosters and game day rosters and what that terminology entails and what it means, and we'll give you some ideas around that. We'll look at the relative age effect and its impact. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with RAE, or the relative age effect, and its impact in sport. It's a very interesting phenomenon. There's lots of research around it and a lot of articles have been written about the impact of the relative age effect. We'll talk about it briefly, as it does impact on what we do in grassroots soccer here in Ontario. We will talk about why we are speaking about this model and the benefits that this model will have on our youth players and their development. The psychological effects, why it's important that we include children at these young developmental years in programs rather than exclude them. So this number, 99.9%, I'll let you ponder on that for a moment. And as you ponder, I'm going to throw you a question. What does this number mean? What does that number mean as it relates to sports? Well, really, the 99.9% of our athletes, the young players we are working with today, won't become professional players. So the question I ask is, should we, put all our efforts into that 0.01% of our athletes who will make it to the pro level, or should we focus all our efforts on the 99.9%, or do we create programs for the 100% of our young players? We would like to think we create programs for 100% of our young players and include as many as possible in our programs. We'll talk a little bit about grassroots guiding principles. There's 5 of these principles, and the first one we like to quote is grassroots soccer is for all. In the old models, we had coaches selecting children as young as 6 and 7 years of age into advanced training programs, travel teams, select teams, rep teams, etc. There's a whole bunch of acronyms and terminology and labels affixed to program. But basically, there was a selection process taking place, or to be more specific, there was an exclusion process taking place. So what this did was this led to some children being exposed to better coaching, better programming, better facilities, better competition, etc. We want all children to have access to all of these items I've just mentioned, not just the select few. We've created open roster concept where we've changed our rules from signing with a team to signing with a club. This allows movement within a club age group, and players can play with game day roster, which can change from game to game. Play is the best means of learning. We want all children to fall in love with the game. We want all children to enjoy their soccer experience. And the first thing many children ask is, when are we going to play, coach? We feel that by putting children in the proper small-sided game environment, they'll learn to play the game and all the various decisions, technical and tactical decisions they may have to make during the game while playing the game and having fun. So we're really pushing that small-sided games be the key component of any practice or any soccer program. We want children to have fun. The children's experience in soccer should be fun. If it's fun, they will come back. They'll want to participate more. If they participate more, they'll only improve. So we want children to have fun. We want the practice to be challenging, not stressful or easy. Easy is boring. Boring is not fun. If it's too stressful, it's not fun. So it's finding that appropriate challenge for the children, that they can meet the challenge, but it's not overly easy or it's not too difficult. But the coach's knowledge and experience creating practices that challenge each individual at the right level is key. So obviously coach education, understanding that creating age-appropriate and stage-appropriate developmental practices that are fun and challenging for the children is key to their success. Children are not miniature adults. A 10-year-old child is not half of a 20-year-old. We've created programs where we've scaled back the size of the field, we've scaled back the number of players on the field, we've reduced the size of the ball, we've reduced the size of the goals to put children in a space that they're comfortable in physically, and technically, and psychologically. They're able to spatially be aware, their spatial awareness will increase if they're placed in the proper environment. So you'll see children playing 3v3, 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, and then entering the adult game at 13 where they would start to play 11v11. Youth prefer to be stimulated instead of instructed. We encourage coaches to focus on the process and not the outcome. We want children to be put in a situation where they can make decisions, where they can be empowered. So instead of being joystick through a practice, like a video game, the children are free to make decisions. The children are free to be creative and to try new things with the coach there to support them instead of instructing them. Through good programming and good environment that the coach creates, the children will be stimulated and want to take part. Talent, that's an interesting word, the word talent, and it is bandied about sometimes in the wrong context. Talent identification, talent potential. I wonder which way we should travel. Which way should we head? So what is talent identification? As many of you would be aware, I'm sure, talent identification looks at the here and now. It's looking at young players and identifying how good is he or she today. Again, usually the physical qualities are easy to assess. So usually the bigger, faster, stronger children are identified because those physical qualities are easier to assess than psychological, technical, tactical, or social and emotional qualities. Talent potential is how good will they become. That is very difficult to identify, certainly a lot more difficult than talent identification. So things like, do the young players listen? Do they listen well to the coach? Do they have a good work ethic? Do they come to practice? Do they come to games and give their best effort? Are they coachable? Do they try to do the things that the coach is asking them to do? They may make mistakes, but do they go back and try and try and try again? Are they committed and dependable? Do they show up to practice? Do they participate? Are they there on time? Are they committed to the game, meaning they don't miss the game for other activities? So these are the type of children within the right environment, with a good support structure, with good programming, will become good players, will become better players. So it's important as coaches of young players who look at talent potential as opposed to talent identification. And again, looking for talent potential is more challenging. Let's have a look at the type of sports we're involved in. So here we have a young gymnast. Gymnastics is an early engagement and early specialization sport. So children get involved in gymnastics at really young ages, 2, 3, 4 years of age. And children, young adults, teenagers are winning gold medals. The average age for a gold medal winner in gymnastics is 19.5 years old. They usually measure 5 foot 1 inch and weigh 103 pounds. Another type of sport here, we see here rowing. So rowing is what we call a late engagement or late transfer sport. So usually people involved in these types of sports transfer in from another sport, maybe a sport they participated in as a child or as a teenager, and then get into a sport like rowing as an adult. And the skills are transferable. Many of the skills they've used in other sports, now they transfer into this late engagement sport, transferring those skills over. Now, our sport you see here, the sport of soccer, again is an early engagement sport with normal to late specialization, meaning again children get involved in soccer programming as young as 4 or 5 years of age, and normal to late specialization, meaning the top players peak at the age of 27.5. So again, late specialization sport, they don't get really good at the sport until mid-20s to late 20s. There we see a little graphic showing us the average age of World Cup winners from the previous 19 male World Cups is 27.5 years of age. So again, backing up that late specialization aspect of our sport of soccer. So here we see 2 female players, 11 years of age. Look at the physical differences, and many coaches would have picked the larger player over the small player. Both of these players were identified under 12 program, and you can see the physical differences, but both very talented young soccer players. Likewise, 11-year-old boys, and again we can see the physical differences between both boys. Again, some coaches may not have selected the smaller athlete. Here's another example, sumo wrestler and a child. Soccer is not about this. Physicality is only one component of the development of a player. It's an important component, but it's only one component. As you're all very aware, technical, tactical ability, psychological strengths, and social skills are all important in the successful development of a young player and a person. Here's another photograph of 2 players competing in an under-12 competitive program. This is soccer, small, successfully competing with large, and there's many, many examples of this across the world in various programs. This is an example from here locally in Ontario, where we see an under-12 girls program with a young female player successfully competing with a larger female player. This is a photograph some of you may have seen. Again, the young player with a circle around his head. I'll give you a second to have a look, and maybe you can identify that young player. Certainly one of the smallest in the group. That young player is Lionel Messi of Barcelona and Argentina. Again, arguably the best player in the world. But again, Lionel Messi, being such a small of stature, may not have been selected in some programs. So well done to the coach who saw the potential, the talent potential in young Lionel Messi. So in the past, our traditional model included things like tryouts to be selected into a program. Kids went through a very successful process to be selected into a program. So the questions you ask yourself is, how were the players selected? Were the selectors qualified to do this? Why are we doing it? All children who ask to be into a more advanced program or a development program, all they want is better practice with better coaches, and probably more practice and better facilities. So why would we refuse children to do that? The children who were normally selected in the old model were selected on physicality, bigger, stronger, faster, usually born earlier in the year with a relative age effect. Stats show us that kids born in the early part of the year were typically selected. The coach adult-centered program, what was easier for the coach, what was easier for the adults, how could we get quick success? Certainly with the types of player we mentioned earlier. There was limited player movement and no flexibility. So if a child was signed to a team within a club, they stayed with that team for the entire season. So whether the kid improved dramatically, plateaued, or their development tailed off, the child stayed with that team in that club. We're looking now for flexibility. The children can move within their own age groups and the various programs within their age group. Again, we spoke about the here and now, or talent identification, picking children for the here and now without looking towards talent potential and what those children will be able to achieve if put in the proper environment with good programming. And clubs were not clubs. The clubs were a collection of teams from age group to age group, and even within age groups, where there were multiple teams within an age group. Coaches did not know one another. There was no joint philosophy. There was no sharing of resources and ideas. So again, it wasn't a supportive, conducive environment to players to develop in. So we're looking at creating true clubs where everyone is pulling in the same direction and helping each other out. So here's a quote from Paula Jardine from the University of Bath. The relative age effect, or as it is sometimes called, the age bias effect, is when elite youth squads tend to be filled by players born in the early part of the selection year. So our selection year here in Canada, and certainly in most, if not all parts of the world, is January 1st to December 31st. So obviously those children born in the early part of the year would be more advanced than those kids born in the later part of the year. And just to help you understand that, here we have a calendar, 12-month calendar from January through December. So if you were fortunate enough to be a baby born in January, you would have potentially 12 months of an advantage over a baby born in December. But you're all in the same catchment area, the same age grouping, but again, potentially 12 months development if you're born in January as opposed to the young child born in December. So again, if you're born in January, the chances of being selected are a lot higher than if you were unfortunately born in December. You can imagine a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, or a 7-year-old, how much added development, both physically and cognitively, socially and emotionally, you would have if you're a 7 or 8-year-old with a year's advantage over someone else in the same program or trying to be selected into the same program. So obviously there's obvious challenges here with this. So what typically happens is we have the A team, and then we're using some caricatures here. So in the A team gets the A team coach. Here we have a photograph of Pep Guardiola, arguably one of the best coaches in the world. So these kids are selected into the A team, and they get the A team coach, one of the best coaches. The B team, these are the kids who are usually born later in the year. We get Will Ferrell as a coach, kicking and screaming. Again, not the best environment to put children in, an experienced coach. So those kids born in the first quarter of the year have, as I mentioned previously, up to 11 months advantage. They typically enter the sport earlier. They're bigger, faster, stronger, cognitively developed, and more developed social and psychological skills. The coach, the children born later in the year have up to 11 months disadvantage. They've typically entered the sport later. They're smaller, slower, weaker, less cognitive development, and less social and psychological development. The coach of the A team, Pep Guardiola in this model, has more knowledge, more qualified, more experienced, typically an ex-player, maybe coming from an educational background, and is more resourceful, has access to many resources that he or she can use in his programming. The coach of the B team is typically less knowledgeable, not as qualified, less experienced, potentially never played or never played at any great length or any great level, and usually has limited resources. Knowledge of how and where to get resources is limited. So right away you can start to see the differences between these two programs. The top of the page being the A team program and the bottom of the page being the B team program. So those kids in the B team program typically get better practice, they get better information in the practice, typically have more practices with better competition and better facilities. The children down at the bottom of our page in the B program, typically poorer practice with poor or no information. Sometimes they don't practice at all, but certainly there would be fewer practices with poorer competition, and typically they're playing and training in less facilities or lesser facilities. So there's an obvious gap here, and as these two coaches work with their children, we think that gap is only getting wider and wider and wider because of the differences in the programming and the differences that the coaches would make in these young children. So what we're trying to do is to bridge that gap. We want to bridge that gap so children, all children, get access to good programming and good coaches and experience what the A team players would get with a more knowledgeable, qualified, experienced coach with better practice, where they're getting better information and better facilities. So let's have a look at the relative age effect, and here's some stats quickly. We'll just show you this. This is tiered in minor hockey, so you can see at the bottom of the graph, January, March, April, June, July, September, October to December. The blue is those kids identified into the top tiers. The purple color is those kids who were identified in the middle tier of minor hockey, and the yellow are kids playing in the bottom tier of minor hockey. And again, you can see that the differences. So about 37% of players from January to March are playing at the top level, that blue color in the graph. And you can see the far end of the graph, over 25% of the players playing in the bottom tier were born in October, December. So huge differences there in minor hockey based on birth date and when players were selected. Here's another example. As you can see, one-third distribution for players in qualifying games for UEFA under 17, U19, and U21. These are players who competed in European Championships during 2010 and 2011. So at the back is the pink identifies when children were born throughout the year from January through December. So you can see it's pretty equally balanced. The pink bars at the back are more or less around the 325 to 350. The blue bars in the front are the children, excuse me, not children, but the young players who were selected into these programs at U17, U19, and U20 during 2010 and 2011. So you can see the majority of the players, over 600 players, were born in January. Goes to just over 500 in February, about the same amount in March, and then starts to drop considerably until we get to December, and it's around the 140, 150 number of players born in December. So again, shows that coaches were selecting players born in the first part of the year, January, February, March, and if you were born towards the end of the year, October, November, and December, your chances of being selected were greatly reduced, even though the same amount of babies were born in those months. Again, that's shown by the pink bars in the graph. So it's important to know this because the children born in the later part of the year who are typically not selected into programs drop out of sport. Typically, if they have a bad experience in one sport, they typically won't join another sport. If they're in a team sport and not selected, they typically may go to a individual sport, but the chances of entering into another team sport are reduced because it's the same conditions. The relative age effect goes across all sports. Here's a graph that shows you the relative age effect in National Hockey League drafts from 2000 to 2005. So as you can see, if you were born between January and March in any given year, your chances of being drafted in the National Hockey League were way higher than if you were born between October and December. So you can see about 375 players were drafted who were born in January and March. And if my eyesight is correct, around 150 players born in October to December were drafted between 2000 and 2005. So this is the impact of the relative age effect in selecting of players. Again, if you're born in the early part of the year, you're going to be more developed as a young player, as a young athlete, and someone born in the late part of the year. So it's giving those kids access to programming, those kids who are born in the later part of the year, access to good programming, good coaches, good curriculum, and a supportive environment for as long as possible before we start making selections. We start streaming kids into elite programs. I understand that has to happen, but if we can delay that selection process for as long as possible by looking at talent potential as opposed to talent identification, and we'll go a long way to really developing the sport, our sport of soccer, and keeping players in the game longer, increasing our talent base, and kids going on to play soccer for life, being soccer players for as long as possible. When they stop playing soccer, becoming coaches, becoming match officials, becoming game administrators. So as I mentioned previously, we want to keep more children in the game. Here's another graph, shows from 4 or 5 years of age up to 12 years of age. And children enter the sport at many spots along this path here. They enter at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Kids enter the sport at various times during childhood. And during this process, coaches start to deselect players. And the reason I use the term deselect, more children are deselected than are selected. So in the old model where children would show up for a tryout or a trial or an assessment or an identification day, more kids were told, sorry, you're not going to make this group, and were told, congratulations, you've made the group. So it really was a deselection process. So again, all along this path, starting as young as, in some cases, 6, 7, 8 years of age, children are deselected. And then at the top here, around 12, 13, 14 years of age, 70%, in fact, new numbers suggest more than 70%, upwards of 75%, leave the game. What we want to do is remove that deselection process and keep the kids, all those kids who were typically deselected in the program, at least until they're 12 years of age. We're suggesting that through this inclusive program, we allow the children to participate in the program of their choice. If they can meet the commitments of the program, typically financial, usually costs some extra dollars to participate, extra time, there's more practice involved, usually travel. Now they're traveling outside of their community to participate and play against other clubs. If the family can commit to these added commitments put on them with the program, then they should be allowed to practice and compete in that program. We're hopeful then we can reduce that 70%, even if it was only 5%. If we can reduce that number and keep more players involved in the game, we'll have more players playing soccer for life, and we'll increase our talent pool for elite players. Just think about the kids who are deselected along this path and how many of them may, if given the right opportunity in the right environment, go on to be successful male or female players, potentially playing for Canada in the Olympics or in the World Cup. We'll never know, because somewhere along the line someone has decided they weren't good enough. Typically children who are quit sports, mentioned this before, they've had a bad experience, they don't like sport and they leave, they feel rejected and excluded. That hurts the children that need sport the most. These are children who are typically born later in the year, and they need support, need effective programming to guide them through those difficult entry years into sport. Promotes elitism. We only want to work with, we only want to develop the best players, give everyone a chance to be the best. It's a higher risk of violence, delinquency when children leave sport. We all know the stats and crime and the trouble children can get into when they're not involved in a good supportive environment, a good program. Obviously turns children off exercise and the health impacts of that. Reduces the talent pool. I mentioned previously about that we keep children that base or that foundation in our programming. Hopefully we can then get more talent to stay in the game, rise to the top and be available for selection into national team programs. Do not realise the potential. So again, it's a late specialisation sport. You don't get good at soccer until you're later on in years. These children who are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age are learning how to play soccer. They're not soccer players yet. Hopefully they will become soccer players, but we must be patient with them. Again, it's long-term player development. This process takes time, and we have to allow them the time and be patient with them and produce and provide good programming for them. So on the open rostering and game day rosters, what we're looking for is free player movement between game day rosters, opportunity for more players to experience better programs, a player-centered approach, a focus on individual development rather than team development, focusing on individual technical skills of player, an opportunity to develop more players through the open roster and game day roster concept. There will be less or no disappointment for young players, and we're hopeful it would help to promote a healthy and active lifestyle. So what is an open roster? Some of you may be unfamiliar with the term. So what an open roster is, all age group players training together. For example, in a club, you may have a U10 program, you may have, for example, a whole bunch of kids. So rather than break them up into teams, say 3 or 4 teams, and off they go on their own merry way individually as teams and train off on their own, we want to bring those age group players together, working together. Coaches working together rather than being individualized in that sense of a club being promoted. No identification of an A team player. Groups within clubs are united. So there's no A team, B team, or C team. There's no blue, red, or green team. It's just a group of players who are able to play together. Coaches get to work with all the players. So again, there's not Coach Tom or Coach Elizabeth works with an individual group or team of players, but coaches get to work with all players within that age group. Players get to train with and play with different players, so increasing their social skills and psychological skills by getting access to different personalities and players of different abilities and qualities within the program. The benefits for all, the players, the coaches and club, the sense of unity, a sense of belonging to a large group, belonging to a club. And we like to think it develops more players getting access to good coaching. So rather than the Pep Guardiola coach, the top coach in the club going off with an individual group, he or she works with a whole bunch of players, and rather than develop 10 or 12 players, they get access to developing 40, 50, or potentially more players in that open roster. So, little model to explain how we see this working in the future. So, for example, in a club age group, in the recreation program, there's 105 young girls in the U10 program. We would advertise the development program to all members in the club. We make a posting in the website or a newsletter or through Twitter, communication with coaches, advertising that a U10 development program is available to all 105 players in the club's recreation program. Through that, we have 36 players who show an interest, and we create an age group open roster of 36 players. So again, the 105 players, the total quantity of players in the recreation program, an advertisement is posted, and from that advertisement, 36 young players show an interest in the age group open roster, and we have 36 players. We develop group practice based on the OSA player development model, the station approach, with small-sided games and technical activities built into the player development model. And then from our 36 player open roster, we create 3 game day rosters. These 3 game day rosters can be compiled with any of the open roster players. There is complete flexibility and freedom of movement within these rosters. So it's not an A team, a B team, or a C team, or a white, gold, or green. It's 3 game day rosters, and any child can play with any roster on any given day. In fact, we encourage movement between the rosters. So that's an example of how an open roster concept would work. So here's how some of the math might work. So we've got our 3 game day rosters. In week 1, the players are numbered. In week 1, we take player 1 to 12, 1 game day roster. Players numbered 13 to 24, the second game day roster. And then the third game day roster would comprise of players 25 to 36. In week 2, we switch it up. This example shows players numbered 1 to 10, and we add players numbered 35 and number 56. And so on across the other rosters. Week 3, again, you can see the players are mixed up again to give us 3 unique game day rosters, where the young players get an opportunity to play with players of similar ability, lesser ability, and advanced ability, to get access and learning from all different types of players, socially, emotionally, psychologically, technically, and tactically. So that's how a game day roster may work with a player pool of 36 players. Just an example for you to get an idea how it could work in your own individual clubs. So in a summary, allow the children to participate in a program that they choose. So do they want to participate in a recreational program or a development program? The family decide, so they decide the deciding factors into what program the children or the family want to get involved in. So the commitment, how much commitment can they give to the program? The attitude of the player, is this something the player feels that he or she wants to do and is willing to commit the time and has the right attitude to the development? And the finances, obviously, with a development program is going to cost a bit more because of added practice. Usually they're traveling a little bit, so there's gas costs, maybe hotel costs, obviously meals if they're traveling on the road. So we want you to include all children. We want all children to be included in these opportunities, equal opportunities for all. Allow them the chance to learn and realize their potential. You could be turning away a potential national team player and never know it. Every child has talent. Every child has a gift. Give them some time because they choose to open them at different times. So why game day rosters? And we're just repeating some of the things we've said previously, but allows more players to participate. More opportunities for players to realise their potential. Be patient with these young players. We're too quick to exclude them, too quick to turn them away. Promote an inclusive program. By promoting an inclusive program, we'll get more players staying in the game. Less players will leave the game because usually if someone's told they're not good enough, typically they would walk away. Focus around a player-centered approach. Develop programs, inclusive programs for children and young players that are empowered, and they're allowed to make mistakes, where they're allowed to make decisions, and are allowed to be part of their own development and their own learning. Create appropriate competition at games. So meaning when we go into a game, we don't really know if we're going to win or lose. And if we do win or lose, it may be a close game, maybe 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, 5-4, rather than a 7, 8, or 9-0 blowout. In those types of games, no one benefits. No one learns anything and has much fun winning 7 or 8-0, whether you win or lose. So it's in creating appropriate competition at games. Improve the young players' self-confidence and self-esteem by telling them they can be part of the program, including them in these development programs. More players are being exposed and developed, so we'll increase their numbers potentially in the model we've shown before to 36 young U10 players. If we only had one game day roster, obviously we'd only select 1/3 of those players. So in improving the number of players, the quality of the programming, and having more players involved in development programs. Every player has an opportunity to play. Players are more motivated. Players' confidence will increase. Less pressure than not being judged. Players will play with freedom if they feel they're not being judged, with the chance of being cut from the program. More opportunity to show potential. We're being patient with the young players. We're giving them time to develop and then hopefully realise their potential. More peer interaction. So rather than being involved with a small group of 12 or 13 players, now they're involved with a group of 36 players, to use our U10 girls example. Obviously more friends. Soccer is a very social game and we want children to be socially active with their friends, so here's an opportunity to meet more friends in a very social environment. And again, I'm really hammering on this player-centered approach. Benefits for coaches, larger groups of players to develop, more peer interaction, so gaining knowledge from your peers, your coaching colleagues from within your club, you're working together, building a larger knowledge base, getting ideas and concepts from your colleagues within your club. More freedom for coaches. Coaches are now able to coach in different areas using a player development model, coaching at different stations, coaching at different small-sided teams. Less pressure from the adults. We've all in an environment where we've told children, sorry, I have to let you go, I have to release you. That's been removed. So less pressure from the adults, from the parents, why their children were not selected. Less pressure from the club head coach, technical director, or board of directors. Again, they can come and ask you why certain players were released, certain players are no longer involved. That has been removed. Using the player development model and the open roster concept, less stress when designing practices. Each coach would look after one individual station and be responsible for that station only. So they're not looking to develop entire practices, but looking after each station or an individual small-sided game. We think players will stay in the programs. If you have the programs fun and engaging with large groups of players, there's an energy, there's an excitement, they're motivated to participate, and they'll enjoy the programs even more. And we think it's a fun environment. Children are now in a larger environment with more players. No one is being judged, no one is being stigmatized as a C player or a level 3 player or a tier 3 player, call it what you want. But all children are in equal opportunities and being able to realize their potential, and the big thing about not being judged creates an even better environment for the children. So grassroots soccer, what it is, we think, is opportunity for all, individual based. So what is the individual players need at that age and stage of their development? Not team based, that comes later. And access for all. We want every child to have access to the programs that are available in your club. Open rosters, that's what grassroots soccer is, including all kids and having their learning and having their development monitored and delivered by good quality coaches, everyone having access to that. Is it coaching adult-centered? Definitely not. As I've said before, player-centered approach to the game. The player is first and foremost in every decision you make. So I'm just going back to this number that you saw at the start, 99.9%. Again, will not become professional players. We have to keep them in the game. Soccer is the biggest sport in our country. There's more participants in soccer than any other sport. We want to keep them in the game. We want to have them to realise their full potential. We want as many players as possible to stay in the game for life, and we want as many players as possible to represent our country and play at professional levels, get access to college and university scholarships, and get out of the game what they want to get out of it. So being patient with them and allowing them to develop and grow in the game, giving every player an opportunity. So a quick summary, again, more players playing the game, more players playing at the level that they want to compete in, more opportunities for all the players, a greater chance of players being able to realise their potential, player retention in the sport. Again, come back to the number I mentioned earlier, 70 to 75% of players are leaving the sport at way too young an age. The number one reason, it's not fun. So let's keep them in the sport, keep them in the programs that they want to participate in. And the obvious health benefits to being active in a sport, and soccer is a wonderful sport. It's been identified as one of the healthiest sports that children can participate in, and it gives them many, many great memories and wonderful social interaction. So that's all we have for tonight. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Again, it has been recorded, so please make this be known to your friends and colleagues in the club. It will be available on the OSA website. Hopefully Carl has been able to answer any of your questions. What I will do is leave the webinar open for a few more minutes for any late questions that come in, so that Carl may answer those questions. And if he doesn't have an opportunity to get to them all, we will put those questions and the answers on the OSA website. So thank you everyone for attending tonight's webinar. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And again, if you have any suggestions or ideas for future webinars, please drop us a line at the OSA. Myself, Carl, or Billy will be pleased to help you and your club or your district association with your player development programs. So thank you all very much. I look forward to hearing from you and working with you in the future. So bye for now.